Most purpose statements don't fail because they're poorly written. They fail because no one identified what actually drives them and how that connects with patron need states on a deeper level. As discussed in previous episodes, archetypes help identify areas where patrons are psychologically deficient, which in turn opens up the aperture on where a brand's purpose has an opportunity to connect. However, brands can have a beautifully worded purpose statement without a psychological substance or gravitas. The relationship between a psychological driver delivered via an archetype and what a brand's purpose is critical. But what does that look like in practice? Today, I want to demonstrate how an archetype affects a brand's purpose using 3 well-known brands. I'm going to take Nike, Harley-Davidson, and Coca-Cola. And I'm going to change the motivational core and show you what the purpose statement becomes as a result. Not the tagline, the purpose statement. The thing that decides what culture gets fostered, why the company offers what it does, who gets hired, and what the company just flat out refuses to do. So let's start with the first one. Nike, if it weren't a hero brand. Nike's stated mission is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And then there's a little asterisk next to it. And that asterisk says, if you have a body, you're an athlete. That asterisk is the hero in operation in 11 words. Essentially, capability it's already in you. Nike's job is to make you believe it and then hand you the tools to activate it. Psychologist Albert Bandura called this self-efficacy, and it's the reason Nike advertising almost never shows anyone having an easy time. It shows friction because the struggle is the product. Now, what if we switch the archetypal driver for Nike to the explorer, away from the hero? Explorer motivation is fulfillment through discovery, not proving something, but finding something. The purpose statement has to stop pointing inward at the person and start pointing outward at the world around. It becomes something closer to put more of the world under people's feet. Now, watch what breaks with Nike's current strategy and outputs. The word athlete disappears immediately because Explorer brands don't need you to be an athlete and they don't want to define you at all. So that asterisk goes away. The whole "if you have a body" line is hero recruitment language, and explorers aren't there to recruit. Competition disappears next. Hero Nike is organized around measurement. The split, the PR, the finish line, the podium. You're being held against every one of those as a standard, but explorer-driven Nike has no standard. It has terrain. It has unexplored terrain and areas. You can't fail at tackling a trail. Then the product follows. Track spikes and marathon super shoes are hero objects because they exist to make a number smaller. Explorer Nike builds for duration, weather, unfamiliar ground, self-sufficiency. Then the athlete roster becomes out of place. The hero endorsement model works because the athlete is a proof of concept for effort. An explorer brand signing a sprinter makes 0 sense. It would instead sign someone who went somewhere else out there in the great unknown. Think Forrest Gump's cross-country running. And then there's the slogan, "Just do it." When it's influenced by the explorer archetype, it stops working because that's a command. It's a coach in your face. Explorers don't respond to being told. Explorer Nike says something more like, "See what's out there," which is softer and exactly the point. The archetype sets the ceiling on how much authority you're allowed to have in your own voice. If that explorer version of Nike sounds vaguely familiar, well, it should. Salomon and On are living in that space right now, and they're doing just fine. Here's what I want you to take away from this one. Hero and explorer are neighbors. Both are about pushing yourself. If you're picking archetypes off a mood board, you'd call them close enough. But one measures you against a standard, and the other measures you against a horizon. And that single difference rewrites the product roadmap, the roster, and the tone of voice. The second one I want to do is Harley-Davidson, if it were really a rebel brand. I've argued this in the book Mass Behaving, and I want to unfurl it in more detail by exploring if Harley actually was a rebel brand. Because it's not. Harley is not a rebel brand. It's one of the most misdiagnosed brands in the archetype canon. The company's own purpose is to fulfill dreams of personal freedom. That's escapism. That's the open road. And that's the explorer language. And it's been explorer language the entire time. Nobody believes it because the leather and the tattoos and the noise all read as a rebel, which is exactly my point. The costume, or presentation/personality as I call it, is rebellious, but the motivation is explorer-driven. And if you write the purpose off the presentation or personality layer, you build a misaligned brand, and misaligned brands don't get traction. They get disbelief. So let's look at Harley if it were really a rebel brand. A rebel brand is defined by what it's against. It's out there to change the world and remove things that they see as injustice. It's defined by that enemy, not about what it seeks. Rebel purpose statements require a named antagonist. So Rebel Harley's purpose becomes something like to reject boring and reclaim the road. Now the antagonist has to be real. Who is it? The monotony of everyday life? The commuter grid? The 9 to 5? Pick one, because the rebel brand that won't name its enemy is just a poser. Rebel brands can't sell a $30,000 touring bike with heated grips and a sound system to a dentist in Scottsdale. That's a comfort object. It's a toy. A Rebel Harley makes cheap, loud, no frills, accessible machines because rebellion needs volume and access. It's not showing off. It's rebelling. The dealership model probably has to die too. Rebels don't do showrooms with a boutique attached. And here's the part that should help this sink in. Harley-Davidson founded a club in January of 1983, coming off a management buyout and a stretch where the company nearly went under. Harley launched the Harley Owners Group, or HOG for short. Membership card, pin, a patch, a touring handbook listing dealers so you could plan a route. Local chapters chartered through authorized dealerships, with the dealership holding approval authority over chapter publications and over who gets to be a member. Annual dues. All these things. Today, it's north of 1 million people. Read that list back and tell me it's rebel behavior. Rebels don't issue their customers a membership card. They don't run a chartered chapter system with a dealer-approved newsletter and dues schedule. The entire premise of a rebel is that nobody asked permission and nobody filled out a form. What Harley built in 1983 is a touring club with a hospitality layer wrapped around it, and the handbook that tells you where to stop is Explorer infrastructure in its purest form. Nothing about it is rebellious. Now, I want to head off an objection because it's a good one. Rebellion is not inherently short-lived. Doc Martens has been the boot of every furious subculture since 1960, and the company is still there kicking. Punks, skinheads, goths, grunge kids, and whoever's buying them this year. So yes, a rebel brand can run for decades or longer. But look at how it survived. Doc Martens never held on to a cohort. It let each wave age out and got adopted by the next one. That's the rebel business model, and it requires a product a 22-year-old can afford to be angry in, a boot. Harley really couldn't run that play if it wanted to. A Sportster starts around $16,000. The touring bikes people actually want run past $25,000. That price requires a buyer at peak earning power, and a man or woman at peak earning power with a mortgage and a 2-car garage is not rebelling against anything. They want a weekend. So the incompatibility isn't that rebellions expire, it's that rebel brands have to keep stoking the rebellion as patrons age and maintain an antagonist that's timeless, like the 9 to 5 grind. Most archetype errors in this industry happen right here. Someone reads the aesthetic the brand presents itself in the world instead of the motive, the psychological backing. And then they write a purpose statement off that aesthetic and then wonder why the organization seems disjointed and not believable. Let's go to the third one and the final one. Coca-Cola if it were a sage brand. Coca-Cola's purpose right now is to refresh the world and make a difference. That's a brand built on the innocent archetype, top to bottom. Happiness, warmth, the shared moment, the belief that small pleasures are worth protecting. Santa, polar bears, the holiday convoy with lights on it. Innocent brands remove tension. Sage is fulfillment, same quadrant, but fulfillment through understanding. A sage doesn't say, I know. A sage says, I'll help you understand. So what's a sage Coke purpose? It has to be something like to help people understand what they put in their bodies. And read that again and notice it's a resignation letter for a sugar-based business like Coca-Cola. Sage brands carry an obligation to the truth even when the truth is inconvenient or costs them. That's what makes them credible, and that's what makes them dangerous to run. The Coca-Cola brand run by the sage archetype publishes the metabolic research. It funds studies it might lose. It puts the sugar content on the front of the can in a size you can read from across the room. It cannot run the holiday convoy because nostalgia is an argument from feeling, and sage brands don't get to make those arguments. The portfolio of Coca-Cola inverts. Zero Sugar, Topo Chico, and Fairlife become the center of the company, and the iconic red can becomes a legacy item you keep around for people who've made an informed choice. Now, we don't have to speculate about how that goes because Coca-Cola already ran a sage decision through an innocent brand once, and we have the footage. April 23rd, 1985, the dawn of New Coke. And the thing people forget is that it was not a hasty call. The company ran roughly 190,000 blind taste tests across the US and Canada. The new formula beat Pepsi, and it also beat the original Coke formula. By every standard of evidence available in 1985, this was the correct decision. That is sage reasoning. Gather the data, follow the data, act on the data. Trust that people will recognize a better answer when it's put in front of them. Coca-Cola Classic was back on the shelves by July 11th. Nobody rioted about the flavor. They rioted because a brand that had spent 99 years being the keeper of the familiar suddenly behaved like a laboratory. The betrayal wasn't chemical, it was archetypal. Patrons had a relationship with an innocent brand, and the innocent brand acted like a sage. And the dissonance was so violent that people were pouring the product into storm drains on camera. I don't know of a cleaner demonstration in modern branding that archetype governs behavior rather than messaging. The messaging was fine. The behavior was flawed. The part that actually applies to you is this. Archetypes fuel purpose and give it the psychological underbelly required to move people en masse. But you can't pick an archetype from a diagram and have that be the beginning and the end. Every founder I've sat across from wants to be the rebel or the creator because rebel sounds like the most fun to be, and the creator brand represents what the company does. It creates. In reality, the brand may be driven by another archetype because the patrons have the need and the company was built to address that need. So here's the test I'd run before you write a word of a purpose statement. First, identify where your core patrons are lacking in their need states. Identify where your competitors are owning a psychological area, then look for the white space. Name the available archetype. Then write down the 3 decisions it forces you to make this quarter. Real decisions with real money attached to them. Maybe it's a hire you have to make. Maybe it's a menu item or a product you have to kill, or a partnership that you just simply have to walk away from. If your brand's purpose statement wouldn't demand those changes, then your statement is just decoration. The purpose and the motive have to be able to survive each other under pressure. Nike, swapping hero for explorer, produces a coherent company that isn't Nike. Harley, swapping explorer for rebel, produces a company that simply would have died. And Coca-Cola swapping innocent for sage produced 97 days of chaos and a case study we're still teaching 40 years later. Identifying the wrong archetypal engine is a death sentence. It doesn't matter where you said you were going because you're not built to get there. So that's how archetypes affect positively purpose statements and then everything that trickles underneath it. Again, these aren't cute little card decks or cute little diagrams. These are psychological behavioral mechanisms. And when you realize that, you can decouple them from the personality and how that personality presents to the world. A rebel brand does not need to be wearing leather and have spiked hair and throw Molotov cocktails any more than an explorer brand needs to have a long beard and hiking boots and a backpack out in the wilderness. These are psychologies, not actual physical manifestations. It should affect why your company exists. So go back and listen or read the article and see how that shift from a Harley brand driven by Explorer, how its purpose statement would shift when it's driven by a Rebel. And then start to think about how that ladders up on everything Harley does and has done and how it would do it differently if it truly were a Rebel brand. That'll start to give you the real traction you need to understand archetypes and use them to their fullest effect. As always, I would love to hear what you think about this. I would love to hear if you disagree. I would love to hear if you do agree. Let's get an awesome dialogue going because I'm over all the misuse of archetypes and all the misunderstandings, and that's what I'm rebelling against. And hopefully you are too by this point. Until next time, keep charging ahead. Cheers.